we are moving on to our project for our Be Creative box. This is our clay project, and I'm going to show you what we're going to make. We're going to make this cute little bumblebee, beehive, pencil holder, or knick-knack holder, whatever you want it to be. If you are someone local, after you make this, you can bring it into us and we'll fire it to make it nice and solid. If you are not local, you'll still be able to make this. You're just going to let it dry, and we're going to talk about that at the end. It doesn't have to be fired because we're not eating out of it. However, it will be more fragile as it's been not fired than if it were fired. So fired, just if you don't know, means we stick it in the kiln and we cook it, so it becomes ceramic. It becomes nice and hard and kind of like this guy right here, right? We're going to take this clay and we're going to turn it into ceramic. All right. So we're going to use that clay to make this little beehive. All right. If we were to fire it in the kiln after it's dry, it would get nice and solid like that little plate I just showed you. This one particular that I made, I did not fire it. As you can see, it's still staying together just fine. But if you were to drop it or something, it would probably break pretty easily. So you just want to treat it carefully. And again, if it's not fired, you can't eat off of it. So just remember, it's just for decorative stuff. All right. So let's talk about what you have in your kit. In order to make this little beehive, you're going to have a hunk of clay, okay, nice and soft. If your clay is not super soft for you, it's a little too hard to work with, you can put it in a bag with a damp paper towel or something and just seal it up for a while and let it set, and it should moisten up pretty good, all right? You're also going to have 2 little skewers, and they're going to be used for cutting the clay, but also for these little stands for your little bees, all right? You'll also have a sponge, because we always give you a sponge. All right, you're gonna want to get yourself a little dish to put some water in. We'll probably have some of those in there, but in case we don't for some reason, it's just a little dish. It's nothing special, and we just have water in there. Okay. If you've never worked with clay before, it's a lot of fun. You can make anything you want really with this box, so feel free. Couple rules of thumb with our clay. If you're not going to do our beehive, that's fine, but just a couple rules of thumb when you're working with clay is, number 1, you do not want it to be super, super thin. So we say you want it about as thick as an Oreo cookie, no thinner than that. And you also don't want it any thicker than your pinky. All right, so when we're building, we want to make sure that the sides of everything are no thicker than our pinky. All right, we don't want any solid balls of clay because number 1, they're going to take forever to dry. And number 2, if we are firing them in the kiln, they'll blow up. And we don't want that to happen. All right, so in order to create this cool little beehive, we're going to create what's called a coil pot. All right, so one of the things you want to do is you want to have your clay ready to go. You want to pinch off a piece because we're going to make a flat bottom first, because that's what's down here. We have a flat bottom, okay? So we're just going to make like a little cookie, basically, all right? And whatever clay you're not using, you're going to want to set it aside and cover it up with a damp towel so that it stays moist, okay? So keep that in mind. We don't want it to get too dried out for you. The other thing you're going to want to do, I'm going to move that over here, is you're going to want to kind of hit it kind of hard. That's a good thing to do. Again, we always cover our surfaces. Hit it like this. It's going to get nice and flat. If we flip it like a pancake like that and then flip it over like that, it kind of will even itself out. The other thing you can do if you want is if you've got a rolling pin, you can use a rolling pin to roll across it. But what we're doing doesn't require it to be super perfectly flat, so we can just go ahead and build. Now, as I said, we are going to make a coil pot, all right? And that's what all of these things are. These are coils. So we start with a nice flat base, which is what I'm making. Remember, we don't want anything thinner than an Oreo cookie, and we don't want it thicker than our pinky. So this little piece right here, see, it's pretty good size. I'm going to smooth it. You can also take like a credit card to do this, but we're just going to kind of push some of the bubbles out. You can also take your sponge and your water, and you can't see that in the, okay, and you can kind of go like this. Now, water with your clay, guys, you don't want too much. You just want a little bit, okay? Water is your friend, but it's not your best friend when you're working with clay. but it is gonna help things stick together. So we're gonna just kind of smooth that out. And one of the reasons I'm smoothing all these out is because sometimes there's little air bubbles in there. We wanna get those out as well, okay? All right, as I said, you can get yourself a little credit card, something flat, firm, rewards card, whatever you've got laying around. And we're smoothing one way and smoothing the other. And then I'm gonna flip it. You guys will also have one of these foam sheets in your kit. It's nice to work on foam. It's easier for your clay, otherwise it's gonna stick to everything. It's really hard to pull it off of stuff. All right. All right, once we get it a good size, feels relatively even and uniform, we're gonna cut it into a circle, and that's gonna determine how big our beehive's gonna be. This guy's, I made him a little small. I kind of like this size, but you're gonna have enough clay to make them a little bigger if you want. If you want to make them small, find something small. A little small plate, like a cup works good. I've got one of these rings for a mason jar. These work really well. And I'm just gonna use that to kind of cut out my circle. All right. Now, if I didn't have something like that and I just had like a round piece of paper that I wanted to use, I could lay that paper down and I could just cut around it with my skewer, okay? But I had that, so I'm gonna use that, and there we go. And you'll see my edges here are a little bit rough, and that's okay. We're gonna get a little bit of water, and I'm squeezing that sponge, and I'm just gonna kind of smooth it a little bit. And you're gonna have plenty of opportunity to smooth your rough edges. Now the thing is, the reason you want to smooth your rough edges is because if you do not smooth those rough edges with your clay, when it dries, especially if it's fired, it's going to be really sharp, okay? Little sharp pieces, all right? So we want to make sure it's smooth. Again, I don't have a whole lot of water on there, just a little bit, okay? I'm just kind of smoothing things out. All right, wonderful. Now I'm going to kind of set him to the side. I'm going to use my card maybe to pick him up a little bit and move him off to the side. All right, now I have my clay. I broke some off, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna make snakes, all right? And this is how we make a coil pot, all right? Remember, just like our flat piece, we do not want it any fatter than our pinky, guys, all right? That's rule of thumb there. So pinky, rule of thumb, kind of same thing. So if you've ever played with Play-Doh or you've made, worked with like cookie dough, you'll know how to do this. You're gonna make yourself a snake, all right? And we're gonna just roll it out. You can do it like this. All right, you want to be kind of gentle with it because you don't want it to break, and you'll feel it getting longer and longer in your hand, right? And I'm going to flip it over and do this side. Sometimes you might break off a piece that's just a little too big, and as you're turning it into a snake, it's just growing and growing, and you're like, whoa, that's too long. That's okay, because you can just kind of pop a piece off and say, I'll get back to that later. Remember that clay that you're not using, you've got it under a damp paper towel, just a little bit of water on it just to keep it moist. You also don't want to work with your clay directly in front of a heater or in front of a fan. We don't want it to dry out too fast. Okay guys, we want our clay to stay about the same moisture level as we work. All right, you'll see I got this big old long snake here, all right? And the goal is we're gonna take that snake and we're gonna wrap it one time around that circle. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and measure it out. And it's just gonna kind of sit on top. All right, and with that, I can use either my trusty card that I might have on hand to cut it, or I can use my skewer to cut it. All right, I'm gonna use this card and I'm just gonna go boop, and I'm gonna cut it off right there. So we've got a nice snake that's gonna wrap around this circle. Now, anytime you're joining two pieces of clay together, you want to score it, all right? What that does is it creates almost like a little zipper. You're roughing up both pieces of clay. So I'm gonna rough up the bottom one, and I'm gonna rough up my little coil, all right? And the way you do that is you take the end of your little skewer and you just gently just kind of scratch the surface. All right, I'm not going all the way through. I'm not digging in there. I'm just kind of roughing it up. Like I said, it kind of makes like a little bit of a zipper. Gives it a little bit of teeth. All right, little teeth around there. Something for that other piece of clay to bite onto. Something to help it hold together. Once I get that done, then I'm gonna take this guy and I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna do little squirmy marks here on this guy. Okay, don't worry if your coil isn't exactly round, it's not perfect. You're gonna have time to fancy it up and smooth things out once you get it all together. So we're gonna do that. And then once you've got score marks all the way around, that's where our water comes in handy again, guys. All right, this is where you got your little sponge. You're gonna squeeze out the water, guys, and you're gonna just use that and just very gently dip your sponge in some water. I'm saying use the sponge to get the water on your finger because I don't want you to get too much, all right? You can dip it in the water, but if you dip it in the water, make sure you get some of that water off of your finger. You don't want it dripping, okay? You just want to kind of moisten it, all right? And you're not rubbing it so much that you're knocking out or smoothing out your little rough parts, okay? So I don't know if you can see that, but I'm just barely tapping some water on there. Once I've got a little bit of water on those little score marks, then I'm going to take my coil and I'm going to attach it. So I've got the little scratch marks that I made on my snake, and I got my little scratch marks that I made on my little disc, and I'm meeting them up and joining them. Now see what happened there? I got that little tail, because sometimes when you play with it, it stretches out. That's okay. Even though I measured it, I'm just gonna go ahead, take my skewer, I'm gonna cut this little extra piece off. No biggie, okay? Push it together here. And so you'll see right there where I join those edges together, there's a little seam line. That's okay. I've got one on this guy too on the back. That's what we make the back. All right, and once I've got that, then I'm just gonna gently smooth those together. All right, I'm gonna use my fingers and kind of shape that little snake. I'm gonna make sure it's pushed down there on my base. All right, and there we go. So that's one coil done. All right, and from there we're gonna do another coil. And I think I already have one here ready to go because I cut that one kind of long. So then we're gonna do the same thing. Now this coil is gonna be just a little bit smaller because we are tapering up this little beehive. We start with a fatter, bigger coils on the bottom, smaller, smaller, smaller until we get to tiny up top. That's how we make it tapered like that, okay? So there we go. And again, I'm rolling and I'm going to score this coil because this is where I'm gonna stick this other one on top of. Right, guys? Just like that. Again, I'm not pushing straight through the clay. I'm just gently scratching up that surface. All right? Same thing here. Make my little snake. And I'm gonna gently scratch up the surface. Okay. A little bit of water. Just a little bit. Just gonna dab, 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 dab. Dab, 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 dab. A little bit on this guy. Add a little bit of water, helps it stick. Again, this one's a little bit smaller. And what I do to make it smaller is instead of laying it right on the outside, like right on top of that first coil, I'm bringing it in just a little bit. I'm gonna show you on the side in just a second. Again, this one's a little too long. I'm trying to keep my seams together, guys. I'm gonna cut that one off. I'm gonna attach it there. Again, we're gonna try to put those two pieces together. So we're gonna go ahead and that little spot right there, I'm gonna give a little scratch. Give this side a little scratch. Gonna go like this, gonna go like this, gonna stick them together. And just like that, you see them? Push them together. This coil that's on the bottom, stuck to the bottom one. The top one, I'm gonna kind of gently tap it down, make it stick to the bottom one. So now we've got two coils, right? Now if you don't do the scoring and you don't add the water, it's not gonna stick together. So what'll happen is when it dries, it'll just fall apart, all right? Especially if you're not gonna have this fired, if you're not local and you can't have this fired, you really wanna make sure that those pieces are really stuck together, guys, okay? If you are gonna have it fired, you should still make sure these are stuck together really good. You can kind of give it a little pull and a wiggle. If it doesn't come apart, you're probably good to go. All right, and then we're gonna just keep building up from there. All right, guys, so I built up my beehive. All right, and this is where you can kind of play with a little bit and kind of shape it. If you want, remember we scored, so we scratched up all those little coils and we used a little bit of water to moisten them to get them all to stick together. At that point, you can kind of reach your fingers in and smooth things out if you want them a little bit flatter. I like mine a little bit flatter. All right. Other thing is you got the seam up the back. If you want to kind of smooth that out, you can take a little bit of water on your sponge, squeeze it out. Remember, we don't want it very wet, and you can kind of smooth it. Okay. You have any rough edges, guys, you want to smooth them out, remember. But we want to keep those little lines because that's what makes it a beehive, right? We don't want it too smooth. All right, but you can kind of squish it if you kind of don't like the shape or you want the shape different. The nice thing about clay is if you get it all done and you don't like it, you can just smush it and start all over again. All right, guys, so if you do that, you do smush it and start all over again, make sure you kind of really work your clay really good and get it all blended back together. I got a little teeny crack right there. You want your clay to kind of stay moist as you're working with it. You don't want any part to dry too much faster than any other part. And that's where your little damp sponge comes in handy as you're working. It's another reason why you want to cover your clay up when you're not using it. All right, so once you got your little shape all done, then you're gonna want to add a little door, right? All right, that's super, super simple. I like to have my seam in the back, so I'm gonna turn it around so you guys can see that. So in order to add your door, and I kind of want to round out my beehive a little bit. I'm gonna push on the inside with my finger a little bit and just kind of shape it, give it a little bit more roundness. Because the nice thing about the clay is it can kind of stretch. All right, but we don't want to poke holes through it. All right, we want to be really careful. All right, so once you got the shape you like, then you can take some clay, okay? And you're just gonna pretty much just design a door, okay? It's just like you did the bottom, you're gonna make yourself a little flat pancake. Not too thick, not too thin. Oops, can you see me there? You wanna try to make it as even as possible because you don't want part of your door super fat and part of it super thin. All right, and we can kind of slam it on the table. That helps smooth it out too. Okay, that's a good thickness. Not too thick, not too thin. All right, I'm gonna use my little credit card to kind of smooth things out a little bit. All right, flip it over. It looks pretty good on that side. Smooth that side out a little bit. Now remember, now we're just gonna cut a door, and our door is just kind of like a, oops, like a little half circle there, right? So I'm just gonna cut this shape. I'm gonna make this the bottom of my door here. And then I'm gonna make a little shh. And again, if you don't like it, you can always crumble it all up and start over again. All right. So there's my door, nice little flat, almost like a mouse hole, right? All right, and then we kind of see where it looks. And I think I kind of like that. If I want to trim a little off, I can trim a little off. I can just go like this. It helps if you make noises too, just so you know. All right, see we got those little rough edges. Remember, your sponge, kind of smooth them out, guys, because anything that's rough, when it dries, is going to be sharp, especially if it's fired. Now, if you're not local and you can't bring it in to have it fired, you could check to see if there's a ceramic studio in your area and see if they'd be willing to fire your piece for you. You're gonna have to tell them a couple things. You're gonna want to tell them that the clay is a low fire earthenware clay. It fires to 06 is what they're gonna fire it to. 04 or 06. Now the O is really important, guys, because that's low. If you say 6 or 4, that's a high fire. That's totally different. This guy would kind of just melt in there. We don't want to tell them that. So it is a low fire earthenware clay. All right. So again, we want to attach this to that. So we want to score it up. So we're going to just do some scratching. A little scratchy, scratchy, scratchy there like that, right? And we're going to do a little scratchy, scratchy, scratchy here where I want to connect it. All right, guys, so our little door is on there, and the last thing you're gonna do is you are gonna create some little bees to stick on the outside. Bees are easy. We're just gonna take a ball like this, and we're gonna squish it into a little shape that we like. Kind of a bee shape. I kind of make him look like that. And then once you get him like that, remember, not too fat, not too thin. If he's too big, I can pull some off. I'm just kind of making a teardrop. Okay. Smooth him out with a little bit of water. Get them all nice and smooth. Not too much water. So I get my bee shape, kind of flatten them a little bit. And then for the wings, you kind of do the same thing. You make a little smaller teardrop shape. Just kind of squeeze it in between your fingers like that. Right? And then once you get the wing ready, then you're going to stick it on there like that. And remember, oops, like that. And remember, every time you stick something on, you got to score, 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 right? So we're going to do that right here. We're going to score, 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 score. Score, 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 score. Little bit of water, little bit of water. I'm going to stick that wing on. It's not too thin, right? Okay. Then we're going to do the other wing. Then we're going to do the other wing the same way. Make that little teardroppy kind of shape with our fingers. Okay, with a little bit of water. We can smooth out any cracks we might have. We're going to score, 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 score. We're going to score, 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 score on our bee. A little bit of water. Stick that wing on and smush it. And we're going to make a little bee. And then once you get them on there, then you can kind of just take your fingers and start shaping them. If you need that wing to be a little bit more rounded, or you need that butt to be a little more pointy, you can do that. Remember, not too wet. We just want a little bit of water. We can smooth everything out. Once you get your bees all ready, you want to stick them on here. Same thing. Scratch, 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 scratch. A little bit of water, a little bit of water. Stick it on. Fingers go in. Fingers go on the outside, and we squeeze and stick them together. Right? We want to give it a little wiggle and make sure it sticks. All right, and you got your bee on there. Remember, you're going to smooth it out. Right? Now, for your bee on your stick, it's going to be the same bee. I'm just going to pull this guy off. We're going to make a bee again, another bee, except for this time, we're going to keep him nice and round. We're not going to smash him. Then we're going to take this little stick and we're going to poke it through. Not all the way through. All right. And it's going to create a little hole right there. And then we just set him down and let him dry. Because once he's all dry, then we'll be able to pop him on the top, right? Once everything's dry, and if you're gonna get him fired, once it's fired, then you can paint it. And we just painted him with acrylic paint and put a little clear sealer on him. And your paint and everything will be coming in the box with everything you need, all right? So just like that. So have fun, make bees. Make something else if you want. You don't even have to make bees if you don't want to. Just be creative, guys. All right, now what did I say? The best part about it is squish. And now I can do it all over again if I want to. Thanks for joining us. Be creative.